Zoroastrianism, The Religion of the Good Life by Rustom Masani. Chapter 6 is the 7 Immortals. We worship the good, strong, beneficent. Well, I don't worship the guardian spirits. Of the righteous, immortal, benefactor. Well, not benefactors. Ameshasmenta. The rulers with their watchful eyes, the high, powerful, swift, living ones of everlasting truth, who are 7 of one thought, who are 7 of one word, who are 7 of one deed, whose mind is the same, whose speech is the same, whose deeds are the same, and whose master and ruler is the same, the Creator Ahura Mazda. Favardan Yasht 22, 82, and 83. So the angel worship crept in, and why don't they worship the God who granted these qualities? A merely abstract conception of the Supreme Being does not satisfy the yearnings of the human heart. It needs something tangible to which it can attach itself. As I just said, you can worship a God through qualities that you know of. Prophets and preachers therefore resorted to personification or deification of abstract ideas and attributes. The entities thus conceived ultimately came to receive better recognition than the Supreme Being. Thus in India, although the Vedas emphasized the ancient truth and the one truth, the people as a whole embraced or adhered to the worship of the Shining Ones, the light beings whom their intellect could comprehend better than the more abstract aspect of the activities of God. Well, actually, the priest kind of led that, not the masses. The priest, because if there's an angel for this and an angel for that, and an unfallen angel, or a lot of things were attributed to the Devis that aren't even fair to say about light beings. But you see very strong proof that it was the priest that invented this to put forward their own cults. Thus also in Iran, although Zarathustra assigned no deity a position equal to that of Ahura Mazda, and obviously no entity as a deity, 6 immortal benefactors came to be worshipped along with Ahura Mazda as forming a heptarchy of celestial beings. These 6 intelligences, as introduced by the prophet, are not so much angels as an integral part of the Supreme Being, and they represent merely 6 outstanding attributes of the Supreme Being. Okay, then you don't have to you can think of these as names of God instead of, separate beings, but, there were angels of these 6 too. Man cannot properly comprehend the unity of God without realizing the diversity within his unity, nor can he understand his manifold activity without a vivid realization of his attributes. To impress those attributes effectively upon the masses, Zarathustra mentions them in the Gathas in direct association with Ahura Mazda, the wise Lord, as the 6 divine abstractions called the Ameshasmenta, are the bountiful immortal. Most cultures ended up worshipping just about anything, so I understand the confusion. Particularly what was done to the tradition. Vahumana, the good mind. Asha Vahishta, the best order of righteousness. Kshatra Virya, the absolute power. Armati, high thought or devotion. Arvatat, perfection. Ameritat, immortality. In course of time, these 6 attributes of Ahura Mazda, to to which was attached great sanctity, came to be revered as beings next in rank to Ahura Mazda. In the later writings, they are represented as being all of one thought, one word, and one deed. Their father and lord is Ahura Mazda. While God, in his essence, gave birth to his qualities. But if you're thinking of them as separate beings, that proves they're not divinities, that they're actually created at some point. But the light beings, they don't have a choice to disobey, so obviously they would be united as one. Their father and lord is Ahura Mazda. The highest heavens, Mana, is their dwelling place. Their sanctified names serve as the most mighty, most glorious, and most efficacious of the spells. To take any one of those names on one's tongue is to acquire keys of power. See, they're referring to these people as magicians, and this guy with a name like this, you think he would be a bit more respectful, because he knows what the Christians mean by this, but the Christians have left a lot of people with inferiority complexes, and particularly, I mean the colonialist among them in particular, but the missionaries and stuff. So people keeping to their faiths, but, so it's time for us all to break that. Those immortals are described as the shining ones, of luminous eyes, exalted, mighty, valiant, imperishable, and righteous. They are the makers, modelers, guardians, protectors, preservers, and rulers of the creation of Mazda. And it is Mazda who has given them beautiful forms. They hold their celestial consoles on the heights of the heavens. Thence they descend to the 7 zones in which, according to the Avesta, the world is divided, and rule over the realms of the earth. The faithful pray that the Amesha Spenta may visit their homes and accept their sacrifices. You don't have to specifically do this. There's acts of worship straight to God and good deeds that will attract light beings, but the light beings, the unfallen angels, the ones that never had a choice to do otherwise, they play a role in various things. Pretty much anything you can think of. Of a good nature. Radiant is the path by which they come down to earth to receive the libations offered in their honor. They are associates of the sun, and they gather together the rays of the moon and shed their luster upon the earth. These spiritual beings also help in bringing about the final restoration of the world, and each one of them will smite his or her adversary at the time of the resurrection. And Zarathustra invokes the bountiful immortals. Ahura Mazda acts as prophet to invoke the Amesha Spenta, even though he could not behold them with his eyes. Obeying his behest, Zarathustra invokes them. He is the first human being to do so. Well, bringing them to mind is not quite the same thing, is it? Following in his steps, the faithful pray to them for help and protection. The ceremonies performed in their honor by unholy priests have no delight for them. Only the homage of the devout worshipper reaches them. From such a worshipper, all injury and distress are warded off. When their votary performs his devotions, he finds his spirit kindled by the spark of their love. Forthwith he dedicates his life to them and all he possesses on earth. Mana. Seeing that this universe was created by the first great cause, most wisely, Zarathustra called him, as we've already noticed, by the proper name of Ahura Mazda, the wise Lord. So you do things in the name, you're remembering whatever good thing, doing it in the name of God. So some of this could be a translation issue. Beholding that the invisible world was pervaded by his benevolence, he applied to this attribute the name Vahu Mana, the benevolent or the good mind. Just as Christian theology, the spirit is inseparable from God, so is the good mind in Zoroastrian theology. Again, just as in Christian theology, the spirit is found in man, the divine within him, so in Zoroastrian theology, the good mind is found in man, representing the genius of good thought, the highest mental purity a human being is capable of attaining. So see, Bahumana, Ashavahishta, Kshathra, Virya, Armati, Harvatat, and Meritat are all qualities that we can be known through. As the first in the creation of Ahura Mazda, Vahumana occupies a seat in the celestial council next to Ahura Mazda. His wisdom is classified into two distinct types of knowledge. In two distinct categories, innate wisdom and acquired wisdom. These two types of knowledge are worthy of propitiation and worship. Spreading and mention and recollection, and thinking through whatever. Ahura Mazda asks the prophet to seek knowledge throughout the night, because the true priest and his disciples work by day and by night to increase their knowledge. Vahumana is also a term used for paradise. Therefore, in the Zoroastrian scriptures, we find the genius of good thought welcoming the righteous souls to paradise. What indeed can be a more agreeable abode to the good man, for the good man, than the good mind? When the blessed ones cross the bridge and come to the gates of heaven, Bahumana rises from his golden throne and greets them in gracious terms. In final conflict between the host of the rival powers, he will smite his adversary. Asha Vahishta. Having noticed that the invisible and visible worlds were subject to his law or order and righteousness, the prophet applied the sublime characteristic of the order of righteousness, the name Asha Vahishta, the best order, or the highest righteousness, as the best order. The law of the universe is part of the essence of God. Asha is associated with purity, and purity is the core of the creed. Ahura Mazda, the Lord of righteousness, has created Asha Vahishta, the greatest, the best, the fairest, the radiant, the all-good, beneficent, immortal. He is the smiter of disease and death. He is the smiter of disease, of death, devils, sorcerers, and noxious creatures. There is but one path, the path of Asha, that leads to eternal life. All other paths are false and misleading. Through Asha Vahishta, and therefore the devotee aspires to behold and be united with Ahura Mazda. Good thoughts, good words, and good deeds make a man Ashavan, or righteous. He obtains purity only when he cleanses himself with them. There comes a day or a night when the master leaves his cattle, or when the cattle leave their master, and the soul leaves the body, but the righteous, which is the greatest and the best of all riches, accompanies the soul after death. So good consciousness, then righteousness, and there's even more qualities that we can look at than these six, but It's a good summary of the rest of them. The adversary of Asha is Druj, deceit or wickedness. Asha is therefore invoked to enter the houses of the faithful, and to smite the wicked Druj. The faithful pray that a righteous king may rule over them, but that an unrighteous ruler may be confounded and overthrown. We have so far spoken of Asha in its exalted sense of mental purity. There is still a higher sense in which Asha transcends both bodily and mental purity. In that deep spiritual sense, Asha is equivalent to the eternal truth, or the divine law, and in consonance with which God has fashioned the whole universe and which permeates the entire creation. And think of that in terms of, okay, if God is Gabur, Gabriel, think of these 7 immortals in that sort of way, without the clarity of language, because Kshatra, Virya, both the invisible and visible worlds are governed by the absolute power of Ahura Mazda, which Zarathustra designates Kshatra Virya, i.e. the absolute or sovereign power. He first represents the perfect strength, the omnipotence, and the universal sovereignty of the Lord, and is invoked to help man along with the path of righteousness. The man who obeys the law of God is blessed with strength and power. In latter times, Kshatra Virya stood not so much for the supreme power or spiritual riches of the divine kingdom as for earthly wealth, and was hailed as the Lord of the universal kingdom, the spirit presiding over mental and earthly riches. He was invoked as the helper and protector of the poor. Speaking of the Kshatra Virya as God's kingdom, Malton observes that the constant thought of the kingdom of God as the supreme object of man's ambition is in the Gathas largely obscured by the difficult language, but that is central, and that there is no more significant link between the religion of the Iranian prophet and that of the Gospels. But that is central, yes. But think of bringing mention. It can be a cosmological thing. You can list off the Meshaspentas, you can list off the various. It doesn't mean that you're worshiping the 7 continents or the sky or the water or something just because you mention them. But, over time, confusion can grow in. Of course, the Persians didn't worship the water, they didn't worship the fire, they didn't worship the earth. They ended up worshiping entities of such things. But when I say Gambrahal, Mikal, Mukal, Mishal, Mushal, Arual, Rapal. Well, I got the order different. It'd be Rapal, Arual, and that would be Gabruhal. And E instead of Ha, or maybe drop the, but outer, drop the there and the there, so in water and earth. But in saying that doesn't mean you have to, worship them. It's a cosmological statement. It's like obviously drawing a symbol of air, fire, water, earth, Armati, the invisible and the visible worlds, exhibit in all directions the beneficent love of Ahura Mazda. Zarathustra describes it as Armati, high thought, or devotion. It is devotion that sanctifies the heart, and is through the medium of devotion that the faithful aspire to traverse the path in safety and approach Ahura Mazda. I choose for myself the excellent Armati. May she be with me. The house lord prays that Armati may enter the house and rout heresy. She is the mother of Asha Vanguhe, or the spirit of good reward, or purity. At the time of death, the pious Zoroastrian is left to to the tender care of Armati, after the dead body is consigned to the Tower of Silence, and the birds therein have commenced their work of destruction, all those who have assembled there offer obeisance unto Armati. Later Armati came to be identified with Mother Earth, sustaining and nourishing all mankind upon her bosom. We have our birth from her. We are nourished by her, and after death we rest in her bosom, until our earthly tenement is done with and mingled with the dust. So after consciousness and righteousness, there's power, and then there's emotion. And finally, we end up at results thereof. Harvatat and Meratat, as the first cause, pervaded the infinite space and always existed and would always exist. Zarathustra chose for these characteristics the appellations Harvatat, wholeness, our perfection, and Ameratat. Harvatat is kind of similar to the meaning of the term salam, for which we have Islam, or Shalom, or in the Talmud, Muslim, the followers of, which was one of the terms of the followers of Solomon. Meratat, immortality, freedom from death, which invariably accompanies perfection. Well, freedom from the worries of death, freedom from, death being the end of good. These two, Amesha Spenta, are closely united to each other and are always spoken of jointly in the Gathas. Together, these two bountiful immortals symbolize perfection of health and immortality, which are the reward of the righteous after death. Together, they will smite the davas of hunger and thirst during the final conflict between the forces of good and evil. On the physical plane, they are respectively the guardian spirits of the waters and the vegetable kingdom, and their blessings bring perfect health and vitality of the body, hence their connection with water and plants, and their healing and health-giving properties. It is a truly inspiring conception that these two attributes of the Creator, representing the salvation offered by Him in this world and the next, are always united. The seeker after eternal bliss has no need to undergo penance or austerities in this world. Immortality is not mere deathlessness. It is also the perfection of the accompanying blessing. It is, as Dr. Cheyenne, Cheyne, how are you supposed to pronounce that? Cheyne correctly puts it, complete happiness of body and soul, begun in this life and continued in an exalted degree in the next. All the Amesha Spenta are thus symbolical of the attributes of the one infinite and eternal being in whom is centered all existence, visibility, and invisibility. In his conception of these attributes, Zarathustra was unquestionably thoroughly original. They were the result of profound contemplation and the most distinguishing features of his creed. See, that implies a disbelief in the idea of him being a prophet, the fact that he would say that. In latter times, however, ignorance of the real significance of those highly abstract philosophical concepts gave rise to the notion that these seven constituted a heptarchy of celestial beings, 6 of them being the holy immortals or archangels, with Ahura Mazda as their head. See also the Yazidi belief about Shaitan, Malaktaus, which is also 1/7, but the 6 sons of the phoenix, as some people would say. So the influence of Satanism creeping back in here. But they're saying, well, let's not worship the Devas, let's worship the Ahuras, and is that six of them being the holy immortals or archangels, with the Hermas as their head. Zarathustra's faith rested, as we have seen, in the belief in only one God. But after his death, the monotheist character of his teaching was not maintained in its pristine purity and simplicity. Object of nature, which he regarded as things created by Mazda and serving merely as symbols of God's greatness and might, gradually came to be regarded by his followers as objects themselves deserving worship. Well, the angels of such things, just as the seven immortal, such as the six archangels here. Pardon me. Each manifestation of creation was believed to have been presided over by a special spirit, a hierarchy of Amesha Spenta and Yazata, worthy of homage, was established, an idea wholly foreign to the doctrines preached by the prophet. Researches of modern scholars have, however, thrown a flood of light on the fundamental and essential principles of the faith, which are for a while obscured by the equitations that had grown round them. We need not hesitate, says Dr. Gore, while understanding the conclusions reached after prolonged discussions by Moulton and other authorities, to think of these holy beings as in the religion of Zarathustra no more than personified attributes of Mazda and of his activities among men. That's true in part, in some references, but also we have, like in India, there's the 33, instead of 33, a group of 33 Devis being worshipped as gods, you had 33 good objects. 33 good things you're thinking of that weren't even being thought of as having a light being, but then a light being got put on it, or alleged light being. But there definitely be different degrees of the light beings. The Thus, Yazata, and Amesha Spenta, different degrees of the beings. But let's go back for a moment here and say Vahumana is Gabriel. Asha Vahishta is Michael. Kshathra Virya Amaritat would be Raphael. Armati, would you say Auriel would be the Ashavahishta? Okay, what are the other ones? Well, it doesn't exactly line up, but it's pretty much the same idea. And I want to close here and maybe back to share 1 or 2, or who knows, I might 7, 8, 9, 10. Who knows what I'll finish to. Yeah, 7, 8, 9 is actually a fair goal, but Kshnatra Ahurahemasta Ashambhaha Kamnamasta. Oh yeah, Tales of a Modern Sufi, I'll do a video on that too.